In the heart of West Africa, in a land known as Upper Volta, a revolution was brewing, one that would shake the foundations of colonial legacy and neo-colonial control. At the center of it all was a man, a soldier, a visionary, Thomas Sankara, a leader who dared to dream of a free and self-sufficient Africa. But why was such a man silenced, and who wanted him gone? This is the untold story of Thomas Sankara, the African Che Guevara, and how his fight for justice became a battle against the forces that refused to let Africa rise. Born in 1949 in what was then called Upper Volta, Thomas Sankara grew up under the shadow of French colonial rule. He was the son of a war veteran, a man who fought for France in World War II, but returned to a homeland still in chains. From an early age, Sankara saw the paradox of African existence. His people fought in wars they had no stake in, worked the land they didn't own, and obeyed rulers who never lived among them. But unlike many, Sankara refused to accept this fate. As a young cadet in the military, he wasn't just learning warfare, he was learning ideas. The writings of Karl Marx, Frantz Fanon, and Che Guevara ignited something within him. He realized that Africa's battle wasn't just against poverty, it was against exploitation. And it wasn't just a fight for independence, it was a fight for dignity. By the early 1980s, Upper Volta was in turmoil. Decades of corruption had left the country in ruins. The elite thrived while the people suffered. Foreign aid flowed in, but it only filled the pockets of a few. Then came a moment that would change history. In 1983, young Captain Thomas Sankara, with the support of his people and fellow revolutionaries, took power in a bloodless coup. But this wasn't just another military takeover. This was a movement. The first thing he did, he changed the country's name. Upper Volta, a colonial relic, was erased. From its ashes rose Burkina Faso, the land of upright people. It was more than symbolism. It was a declaration. This was a new era. Sankara didn't just preach revolution, he lived it. He sold off government limousines, slashed the salaries of officials, and refused foreign aid that came with strings attached. Instead, he urged Burkina Faso to grow their own food, make their own clothes, and build their own future. He led a vaccination campaign that saved millions of children. He planted forests to fight desertification. He empowered women, banned forced marriages, and appointed them to government positions, something unheard of in much of Africa. But with every bold step, he was making enemies, not just within his own country, but among those who had long controlled Africa's fate from afar. Thomas Sankara had declared war, not on people, but on the systems that kept Africa in chains, and that made him a marked man. What happened next would shock the world, and the truth behind his assassination is even more chilling than you think. From the moment Thomas Sankara took power in 1983, his vision was clear. Burkina Faso would no longer be dependent on foreign aid or Western influence. His bold stance threatened not just the political landscape of his country, but also the deeply entrenched economic interests of powerful nations. For decades, Western powers had maintained a grip on Africa through economic policies disguised as aid. Institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank extended financial support, but their loans came with conditions that ensured African nations remained economically tied to the West. These financial agreements forced African countries to privatize their resources, open their markets to foreign companies, and prioritize debt repayment over the welfare of their own people. Sankara saw through this deception. He openly rejected foreign loans, stating that dependency was a form of modern slavery. Instead of taking aid that came with strings attached, he urged Burkina Faso to build their own economy from within. He launched ambitious agricultural programs, encouraging people to farm their own land rather than rely on imported food. His policies showed immediate results. Burkina Faso, a country that had suffered from chronic food shortages, achieved self-sufficiency within just a few years. This was a direct challenge to the Western model of control. The economies of former colonial powers like France were built on African resources. Their companies extracted gold, uranium, and other valuable minerals, often paying little in return. By promoting economic independence, Sankara was setting a dangerous precedent. If Burkina Faso could break free from foreign influence, what was stopping other African nations from following suit? His refusal to allow multinational corporations to exploit Burkina Faso's natural resources put him at odds with Western business interests. He rejected unfair trade deals, called out the corruption of foreign-backed elites, and demanded that Africa's wealth benefit its own people. This was not how the system was supposed to work. Africa was meant to remain a provider of raw materials, not an independent economic force. As his message spread, Western leaders grew uneasy. A young, charismatic leader was openly defying the global order, proving that Africa could prosper without foreign intervention. Something had to be done. Sankara's defiance wasn't limited to economic policies. He spoke boldly on the international stage, exposing the hypocrisy of Western governments that claimed to support African development while ensuring its continued dependence. His speeches at the United Nations and the Organization of African Unity were nothing short of revolutionary. He challenged African leaders to reject foreign aid, refuse to pay illegitimate debts, and reclaim their sovereignty. His stance on debt was particularly alarming to the West. He called it a tool of oppression, arguing that African nations were being forced to repay debts that were created by colonial powers. He urged fellow African leaders to form a united front and refuse to pay. His words sent shockwaves through European capitals. If African nations followed his lead, it could collapse the entire financial system that kept Africa subordinate. Sankara also posed a cultural and ideological threat. He rejected Western consumerism and promoted local industries. He urged Burkina Faso to wear clothes made in their own country rather than imported Western brands. His message was clear. Africa didn't need to imitate the West. It needed to forge its own identity. His progressive social policies were equally concerning to Western governments. He was one of the first African leaders to promote women's rights on a national scale. He banned forced marriages, encouraged women to join the military, and appointed them to key government positions. These policies threatened the traditional power structures that Western-backed leaders often relied on to maintain control. Beyond his own country, Sankara's ideas were spreading. Young revolutionaries across Africa saw him as a model for change. His movement was inspiring a new wave of anti-colonial sentiment, something Western powers had spent decades trying to suppress. France, in particular, was deeply disturbed by Sankara's rise. Burkina Faso had been part of its colonial empire, and Paris still considered the region within its sphere of influence. French intelligence agencies were closely monitoring Sankara, and reports indicated that his radical policies could destabilize their economic and political control over West Africa. Behind the scenes, diplomatic pressure was mounting. Western governments worked through regional allies, urging neighboring leaders to contain Sankara's influence. They found a willing partner in Blaise Compaoré, Sankara's former ally who had grown resentful of his growing popularity. As the pressure intensified, whispers of a coup grew louder. Western-backed African leaders saw Sankara as a liability, a revolutionary force that threatened the status quo. The decision was made. Sankara had to be eliminated. His assassination would not just remove a political adversary, it would send a clear message to anyone who dared to challenge Western dominance in Africa. And on October 15, 1987, that message was delivered in the form of gunfire. But Sankara's death was not the end of his revolution. His ideas, his vision, and his courage continued to inspire those who believe in a free and independent Africa. The question remains, how many more leaders must fall before the chains of neo-colonialism are finally broken? How attempts were made to overthrow his government? From the moment Thomas Sankara took power in 1983, he was a marked man. His radical policies, rejecting foreign aid, nationalizing resources, and empowering the people, made him enemies both at home and abroad. Western powers, regional leaders, and even those within his own inner circle viewed him as a dangerous disruptor. His days were numbered. The first signs of a coup began with whispers in the corridors of power. Foreign intelligence agencies closely monitored his government, waiting for the right moment to intervene. France, the former colonial ruler of Burkina Faso, was particularly concerned. Sankara had severed many economic and military ties with France, threatening its long-standing influence in West Africa. French intelligence reports at the time labeled him a destabilizing force, one who could inspire similar movements across the continent. But it wasn't just foreign powers who wanted him gone. Within Burkina Faso, Sankara's rapid and uncompromising reforms alienated key figures. The country's elite, who had benefited from corruption under previous regimes, found themselves stripped of their privileges. Traditional leaders, angered by his stance against tribal hierarchy and forced labor, turned against him. Even within his own revolutionary government, cracks began to form. One of the biggest sources of internal dissent was Blaise Compaoré, Sankara's longtime ally and second-in-command. Initially a supporter of the revolution, Compaoré began to feel overshadowed. He disagreed with Sankara's aggressive stance against foreign aid and his refusal to compromise with powerful nations. Compaoré, unlike Sankara, believed in diplomacy and pragmatism over ideology, and it was through him that Sankara's enemies found their way in. By 1987, opposition forces had gathered enough momentum. Western-backed African leaders, particularly Félix Houphouët-Boigny of Ivory Coast, had long been wary of Sankara's influence. They feared his revolutionary message would spread, weakening their control. Houphouët-Boigny, a close ally of France, reportedly facilitated secret meetings between Compaoré and his backers. The plan was simple. Sankara had to be removed, and Compaoré would take his place. As these conspiracies unfolded behind closed doors, Sankara sensed the danger. He had always known his life was at risk. In speeches, he spoke openly about the possibility of being assassinated. He even told close friends, "If you kill me today, thousands of Sankaras will be born tomorrow." But despite his awareness, he refused to back down. He did not increase his personal security. He did not flee the country. He remained defiant, believing that a true revolutionary must be willing to die for his people. What he did not realize was that the final act of betrayal would come from within his own circle. The events of October 15, 1987, unfolded with brutal precision. Sankara was attending a meeting at the Council of the National Revolution headquarters in Ouagadougou, unaware that it would be his last. That evening, armed men stormed the building, firing indiscriminately. Sankara and 12 of his closest allies were gunned down in cold blood. His body was quickly buried in an unmarked grave, as if those responsible hoped to erase him from history. Blaise Compaoré emerged from the shadows, claiming leadership over Burkina Faso. He justified the coup by accusing Sankara of endangering the country's stability. But the truth was evident. Sankara had been assassinated because he refused to bow to foreign interests and corrupt elites. But who were the true masterminds behind his killing? While Compaoré took direct control, the assassination had the fingerprints of a larger, more coordinated effort. Western intelligence agencies, particularly those of France and possibly the United States, had long viewed Sankara as a threat. Declassified documents later revealed that the French government had deep concerns about his policies and growing influence. Reports suggest that France had prior knowledge of the coup and may have provided covert support. Félix Houphouët-Boigny of Ivory Coast played a crucial role as well. His close ties to France and the CYA made him a strategic link between Western intelligence and the coup plotters. Under his guidance, weapons, financial support, and diplomatic backing were funneled to Compaoré's faction. Compaoré, now in power, immediately reversed Sankara's policies. The revolutionary dream was dismantled piece by piece. Burkina Faso reopened its doors to foreign aid, and the country fell back under Western economic control. The ideals of self-reliance and African unity that Sankara had fought for were erased in a matter of months. For 27 years, Compaoré ruled Burkina Faso with an iron fist. Any discussion of Sankara's assassination was suppressed, and his legacy was reduced to whispers among the people. However, the truth could not be buried forever. After Compaoré was forced into exile in 2014 due to a popular uprising, calls for justice grew louder. In 2021, after decades of denial, Compaoré was tried in absentia for his role in Sankara's assassination. He was sentenced to life in prison. But for many, this justice came too late. The real architects of the coup, those who operated behind the scenes in foreign capitals, were never held accountable. Though his life was cut short, Sankara's ideas did not die. Across Africa and beyond, he remains a symbol of resistance against neo-colonialism and corruption. His speeches continue to inspire new generations of activists, leaders, and revolutionaries who believe in a self-reliant and independent Africa. His assassination was meant to silence a movement, but instead, it immortalized him. The forces that conspired to eliminate him failed to destroy his vision. Today, in Burkina Faso and across the continent, his words still echo. While revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas. For more than 3 decades, the true story behind Thomas Sankara's assassination remained shrouded in secrecy, hidden beneath layers of political deception and foreign manipulation. Those who orchestrated his murder ensured that the truth remained buried, preventing any real accountability. But today, a new leader in Burkina Faso is daring to challenge this silence, Captain Ibrahim Traore. Since taking power in 2022, Traore has made it clear that his government is committed to exposing the hidden forces behind Sankara's death. Unlike previous regimes, which either ignored or actively suppressed investigations into the assassination, Traore has opened the doors to long-sealed government files, revisited intelligence reports, and encouraged witnesses to come forward. One of his most significant revelations involves the role of France in Sankara's assassination. While suspicions about France's involvement have existed for years, no leader had openly accused the former colonial power. Traore, however, has been bold in stating that French intelligence agencies were not only aware of the coup, but may have facilitated it. His government has begun reviewing classified documents that detail how France saw Sankara as a threat to its continued influence in West Africa. But France was not the only foreign power involved. Traore has also pointed to the United States and its Cold War-era intelligence operations in Africa. During the 1980s, the U.S. sought to prevent socialist-leaning African leaders from gaining power, fearing that they might align with the Soviet Union. Sankara, with his radical policies and strong alliances with Cuba and Libya, became a prime target. Traore has spoken about declassified documents, suggesting that the CIA monitored Sankara's government closely and may have played a role in his elimination. However, it wasn't just foreign interests that contributed to the coup. Traore has revealed how key figures within Burkina Faso itself betrayed Sankara, including his close ally turned rival Blaise Compaoré. These revelations have reignited calls for a complete reopening of Sankara's case, with the goal of finally bringing justice to those responsible. For Captain Traore, uncovering the truth about Sankara's assassination is about more than just history. It's about shaping Burkina Faso's future. His mission is clear: to free his country from foreign control and ensure that Burkina Faso's sovereignty is never compromised again. One of his most decisive moves has been to cut military ties with France. For years, French troops had been stationed in Burkina Faso under the pretext of fighting terrorism, but many citizens saw them as an extension of neo-colonial control. Traore, responding to the demands of his people, ordered the French military to leave, signaling a new era of independence. Beyond removing foreign military influence, Traore has also emphasized economic independence, echoing Sankara's vision. His government is prioritizing local industries, reducing dependency on Western aid, and strengthening ties with other African nations that share the same vision of self-reliance. Looking ahead, Traore aims to ensure that Burkina Faso does not fall into the same traps that led to Sankara's downfall. He understands that challenging global powers comes with great risks, but he remains committed to protecting Burkina Faso's sovereignty, uplifting its people, and continuing the revolutionary ideals that Sankara once championed. Though Thomas Sankara was assassinated in 1987, his legacy has only grown stronger with time. Across Africa and beyond, he remains a symbol of resistance against imperialism, corruption, and exploitation. His speeches, filled with fiery calls for self-reliance and unity, continue to inspire young revolutionaries and leaders who believe in a free and independent Africa. One of Sankara's most lasting contributions was his emphasis on self-sufficiency. He proved that even a small, resource-limited country like Burkina Faso could achieve food security, economic growth, and national pride without foreign aid. His agricultural policies turned Burkina Faso from a food-importing nation into one that produced enough to feed its people. His commitment to women's rights, environmental protection, and grassroots development made him a visionary far ahead of his time. Today, leaders like Captain Traore are drawing inspiration from Sankara's example, proving that his ideas are not relics of the past, but blueprints for the future. Sankara's assassination was meant to silence his movement, but instead, it sparked a new wave of anti-imperialist sentiment across Africa. More than 30 years later, his vision is more relevant than ever. Many African nations are now rejecting foreign interference, calling for economic independence, and demanding the right to determine their own future. Countries like Mali, Niger, and Guinea have followed in Burkina Faso's footsteps, severing ties with France and pushing for a new era of African-led governance. The African youth, increasingly aware of their continent's history, are no longer willing to accept the exploitation and corruption that have kept their nations underdeveloped. Traore's revelations and bold leadership are part of this larger movement, a movement that seeks to complete the unfinished revolution of Thomas Sankara. His willingness to expose the truth and challenge the powers that be signals a shift in African politics, one where sovereignty is no longer just an idea but a demand. However, the battle is far from over. The same forces that eliminated Sankara still exist today, using different strategies to maintain their influence. The question remains, will Africa finally break free, or will history repeat itself once more? Thomas Sankara once said, "While revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas." And today, his ideas are more alive than ever. What do you think about Captain Traore's revelations? Do you believe that Africa is finally on the path to true independence? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into African history and politics. Thanks for watching, and remember, the struggle for justice never ends.